Okay, so that's decided. England are going to win the World Cup in 27, and my job here's done. So see you next week. I don't really know where to start with this week's games, to be honest. We had a little bit of everything, and at the same time, a lot of nothing. And what I mean by that is we're playing international games outside of a window. Some players are available, some players aren't available. We've got tier 1 versus tier 2. I just don't know what to really think of this weekend's game, to be honest. So I will try and find a positive spin on some of the games. But honestly, when we're going to talk about Scotland and USA, just skip to the next part. So let's start at Twickenham, where England hosted Australia. And last year, they did come unstuck in the last minute to that Diogo try in the corner. Whereas this year, I think England looked pretty good considering they're on the back of a great tour in Argentina. They flooded a few players through. And to be honest, we've just seen Australia collapse, which we said this at the end of the Rugby Championship. We were expecting such big things after the Lions series. But the reality is they just couldn't hang. Now, I don't think the likes of Will Skelton or Lenny Katow or Tom Hooper's going to make a massive difference in that because realistically, Hunter Paisami played quite well. Jamie Williams looked all right. Realistically, you're not going to add much more to that Australian team, but they just looked tired. And if it wasn't for a little bit of Harry Potter magic, we could put a little bit of a wand and some noise here. They didn't really offer much. You know, outside of that interception, they were scoreless and they were scoreless the whole second half. So fair play to England. There was a lot to be said about that England team when we looked at the starting lineup. Now, England are almost trying to get their own little bomb squad coming off the bench, which clearly worked really well. But the argument is, if that was against New Zealand, like it will be in a couple of weeks, or if it was against, say, a Bok team, or even in the Six Nations against Ireland or France, are Finn Baxter and Joe Hayes really going to be able to hold up that scrum long enough for the likes of Ellis Genge to come off the bench? We haven't really answered the question about what we're going to do with this midfield for England. Now, Ollie Lawrence and Henry Slade both started the season really well so far. And to be honest, Dingwall and Freeman just didn't work. And Dingwall has looked fantastic for Northampton. And the argument is when you have that Northampton spine, it can work really well if it's Mitchell and then Finn Smith and then Dingwall and then maybe Freeman and Ollie Slightholme and Furback to come in. It sounds great on paper, but the reality is to step up from being a good Premiership player to a good international player. I just think if you look across the other side, Hunter Paisami looked like a world-class 12. And even then, Lenny Katow is going to come back and add a lot of value to that. So, yeah, I just don't think Dingwall's going to be the answer. And for Freeman, look, he can run a hard line, but he's very good on the wing. And there's a lot to be said about just trying to get your best players on the pitch. But to be honest, I would just put him back on the wing. And if you go with Favour Bosa on the other side, but he's got a lot to learn still. He's making a lot of mistakes that I think everyone sees the glitz and glamour and everyone sees how hard he can run. But the reality is he's not there yet. So do you just go with Freeman on one side, Roebuck on the other? Freddie Stewart actually looked really good at fullback again, which again, if you look at the last year, he almost had a chip on his shoulder after getting dropped for England. So he's worked so hard on his high ball. We know he's world class, but he looked great in the air. He was running really well. He was happy to attack, kick when needed. So look, I think there's a lot to be answered. We've obviously got Fiji next for England, and will he rotate a little bit? We'll see. Up front, we know that they just have an abundance of talent and so many options in that back row. Guy Pepper looked fairly good. I don't know, again, if he's world class, but to be able to bring Tom Curry off the bench obviously makes a massive difference. We've got Cunningham South who can offer that massive ball carrier, but I do think we just missed a little bit of Tom Willis grunt. Just give me that ball. Let me run as hard as I can. Now, against Fiji, I don't know if that's going to be the best option anyway to try and bring someone in like that because we know what Fiji can offer. If you've got someone like Botti in the back row who's just going to stand there and bang back. But Benal looked good at number 8. Again, I just don't think he is that Tom Willis ball carrier that we wanted to see. The other question that wasn't really answered was the number 10 jersey. Now, George Ford did have a good game. He looked good, but he had good people around him. His kicking was a little bit off. Kicks to touch. He obviously missed a couple of conversions. So we're leaving points out there. But look, he's a great player. We saw what he did in Argentina, but knowing that you've got Finn Smith ready to go, and again, we've just spoke about that whole Northampton background and who's around him. Finn Smith might be the one that we choose for Fiji. And again, even a fullback, we saw a couple of years ago in the World Cup, the famous picture of Marcus Smith after that Fiji battle with blood everywhere and a fat lip. Is he now going to come back into the squad? Obviously, didn't get even on the bench this week. So next week's going to be an interesting one. I think next week against Fiji, I'd like to see Finn Smith start. I'd like to see Slade and Lawrence back in midfield. And I think even outside of them, whether they bring Marcus Smith into fullback or not, I think there's enough talent there in that squad amongst the back three to rotate a little bit. Probably give Favoboso another shot, see what he can do against a bigger, stronger team. But we've seen what Robot can do in the air. So realistically, are we going to play that kicking game against Fiji? If so, fair him or Freeman. But why not rotate out and get someone else in? We were just saying about Australia looking tired after travelling back in Japan. Now they've got to go into Europe and face Italy, who on paper have a load of talent, especially from the back row onwards. We've seen how many players are now playing either in the Premiership or in the URC. And if you look at that backline, we could be looking at Garbisi playing phenomenal in France. Brex and Menoncello, we know what they've done, especially in the last Six Nations. Outside of that, Capuazzo, Louis Liner, they've got so much talent on paper, but when it comes down to it against the tier 1 teams, they just can't put the performance together. So, look, is that the opportunity for Australia to get back to winning ways? Maybe, but it could be a good game to watch if both teams actually turn up. Game 2 of the weekend, and we saw a loaded box side absolutely put it on Japan. Now, there was a lot said in the week about the miracle of Brighton. Japan have just had a good running game against Australia. They're off the Pacific Nations Cup. But look, when push comes to shove, you've got the world champions against maybe the bottom tier 1 team, right? And Japan haven't ever really been able to put on a show against these bigger nations. Now, next week, the Boks are going over to France, and we have just seen Sasha can do it against Argentina. Sasha can do it against Japan. Sasha does it in the URC. But there's a lot of talk about this French side. And is this the game that actually Rassi brings Pollard back in, who's had a couple of weeks rest from the balls now as well? So we could be looking at a more old school traditional Springboks, set piece dominated game, scrum, line out, more. Let's just have a look. As for France, we saw that tour of New Zealand then blood through loads of young players get an opportunity to wear the national shirt. And we've seen this year already in the top 14, on any day, any of these players can step up and beat anyone, whether it's the Toulons of the world, the Toulouses of the world, or Racing like we've seen on the weekend. Leo Varey's just been called back into the squad, and I would love to see him get an opportunity. But chances are probably going to see Ramos back in at 15. In midfield, again, they've got loads of youngsters coming through, but Gael Ficouche just captain Racing on the weekend. So, look, the French have got so much talent across the board, from number 1 all the way through to 15. This could be the game of the weekend to watch. Game number 3 of the weekend, and we had good old faithful Scotland doing World Rugby's charity work once again, playing teams that no one gets anything from. Now, all due respect to USA, winning 85-0 isn't good for Scotland, and losing 85-0 isn't good for USA. So I don't really know what we do with the USA anymore, because in a couple of years' time, they're going to be hosting a World Cup. We'll get onto what happened at Chicago. But they keep losing games. They just scraped through to get through to the 27 World Cup as well. They didn't qualify for before. In the MLR, we're losing team after team. And it just looks like they're so far behind everyone else that unless you give them a run-up of just tier 2 and tier 3 games, maybe they should do what Scotland do. Go to the nightclub, find the 3 out of 10, and be happy that you've pulled. Maybe they go and play the likes of, even Qatar and Kazakhstan and get some wins under their belt. But at the moment, USA looks so far off it. And as far as Scotland, they've recently played Samoa, Fiji, Maori All Black, Portugal. We don't really know what this Scotland side can do at the moment. And they've got some great players there. We've seen between Van der Merwe and Darcy Graham, they just keep taking who's the top try scorer for Scotland. But if all you keep doing is shagging 2 out of 10s, of course your numbers are going to go up, lads. Come on, start playing someone decent. The worst bit about all of this is next week, they're going to be playing New Zealand, and New Zealand are on a very good run of form at the moment. And again, we'll talk about what happened in Chicago, but the likes of Leicester Fainga'anuku coming back in, man, if I'm Scotland, I'm a bit worried about this one next week. Over to Chicago, where this was meant to be not only the game of the weekend, the build-up for this game was incredible. The rematch. We saw what happened a couple of years ago when Ireland managed to get their first win against New Zealand. In the last 10 games, Ireland have won 5, New Zealand have won 5. This game had the opportunity to be everything. Take the game over to America, brand new audience, stunning backdrop. But then what happened? The second minute of the game, we get arguably the softest red card we've seen in rugby for years. Now, the comment section is probably going to be full with what I'm about to say. By the letter of the law, it was a red card. Ty Burton is 2 out from the ruck. He is never in a legal position to make a tackle. He is always upright. He hits Beauden Barrett in the head. He doesn't attempt to wrap. If World Rugby are going to create a flow chart to give a red card, well, unfortunately, that's a red card. But is that really what we want for the game? That is by far the softest red card. Now, I'm not saying, like Austin Healey did, we need to see everyone throwing punches and fighting. But come on, surely we can get over someone standing up and someone accidentally hitting him. Now, that's just ridiculous. Elsewhere in this game, we had Scotty Barrett go off, who's apparently just had 12 stitches in his knee. So he's probably going to be out of this Scotland game on the weekend. But Fabian Holland looks world class. The way he's slotted in, and we said this not only last year through Super Rugby, but also in the Rugby Championship, he looks like he's made to be an international lock. So fair play to him. Great performance. Outside of that, seeing Ardy score in the corner and give it absolute lemons to the crowd was great to see. And again, we're seeing one of the world's best at the moment put on performance after performance. If I'm Scottish back row, I just don't know if I'm willing to face Ardy up front and actually get some change out of it. In the backs, Cam Roygaard looks like he has not missed a beat. He might be the best passer of a ball in World Rugby at the moment. The passes he's throwing are so fast, strong, on point, in front of players, behind players. He's just got it all as a 9. And when you take Bodie outside him, who ended up being the only Barrett left on the pitch, man, they are looking sharp. A couple of weeks ago, we put out a post about what that All Black midfield should be and who realistically is going to be partnered with Geordie Barrett. Now, obviously, Geordie had to go off. Now, we'll see how he gets on. But we've had Anton Lennon-Brown, didn't really look fantastic. David Harvilli was okay, but he ended up playing for the All Blacks 15 on the weekends. We've seen Quilter Autumn come in, and again, as a 13, he's been okay, but not really managing that ball playing that we want from the All Blacks. Leicester Fainaniku has been applying his trade over in France the last couple of years. Looks fantastic. One, he looks like an absolute monster, and he's carrying that ball Marnonu-esque. But not only that, his footwork into every contact. He's always getting gain line and always beating defenders. But not only that, he looks just as quick as ever before. So the opportunity to play him on the wing, and again, we kind of saw this with Rico over the last couple of years, he looked fantastic, and I have no doubt he'll be starting next week. As for Ireland, they look like they've really struggled to find their identity after the last couple of years. We've seen this Irish team absolutely peak in 2023, beating every single team they played, tier 1 all the way through, going to the Six Nations, get a Grand Slam, and then obviously we saw what happened in the quarterfinal of the World Cup. And since then, we know that we've lost a few players and we've had a couple of people retire, but they just really don't know what style of rugby they're looking to play at the moment. When they go to ball, move the ball wide, I just don't know if Stuart McCloskey is the guy that can really hold that midfield together. We know what we can get from Bundy, but again, it's a little bit one-dimensional. Jack Crowley, Sam Prendergast, we saw neither of them get picked for the Lions. How do you then go back into camp, face Andy Farrell and go, yeah, I'm your man who's going to take this forward? Again, they just looked second best on the weekends. Now, unfortunately, they're playing Japan next week. So again, we're not really going to get anything out of that game. But I'd like to see Ireland pick a style that they can play and give it a go. Even though it's Japan, if you're going to move the ball, go out the back, run your lines that you used to. And if you're going to play an upfront old school Irish game, then do it. But be dominant with it. And I just think that until, Taylor Doris came back on, fair play. And he first touch of the ball, he was beating people. But outside of that, I just don't think Ireland have the the same oomph they had before. And if I'm playing against Ireland, I actually think we've got a good chance now. We've got a couple of games next week that, again, we haven't really seen much from. One, unfortunately, is Wales. Now, look, new coaching, okay, but realistically, even Zamet adding to that back line, I don't think it's going to offer enough against Argentina. Now, I would love to eat my words next week, but I can only see an Argentina win. And the only other big team that are coming back next week to play is Georgia, as they host USA. And I don't know, USA might be able to get a score or two, but this is probably going to be another 50 or 60-0. Now, I know that might have come across a little bit negative and pessimistic, but at the end of the day, we got to sit back and watch game after game, few beers in hand, and what else can we ask for from a weekend? Next week, however, we've got even more internationals, as we've got England Day taking on the New Zealand 15 team. We've got Argentina 15 travelling to Bristol to get a game. Plus, we've got all the other internationals and some tier 2 and 3 competitions as well. So make sure you're sticking to All Things Rugby across all platforms, as we'll be previewing next week's games. Once again, I've been Shanair, and thank you for watching All Things Rugby.